Alright, so welcome back. I'm not going to spend much time because we've done this several times before, but let's go over a couple high points in the syllabus and we're going to start writing code right away. Alright, I've told them before I think this class should be renamed. Alright, I also, Google recommends that all new Android development be done in Kotlin. Mr. Smith doesn't agree with that, and he is right as far as the majority of stuff that's out there right now is in Java. All right, but if there's time at the end of the semester, I'd like to show you a little bit of Kotlin and have you write an application or so in Kotlin, even if it's one we do as a class. I'd rather do that so you've at least been exposed to it, okay? All right, you know the time. I'm glad you're all here. Again, it's 12:05. There may be, on occasion, it may be a little tough in here because they've got the class before ours, and he may be getting his stuff together and whatever, and I'm getting out of there, so. All right. You know my information, and this really is 6. I put 7 there, but I'm always here before 6, so. All right, so in this particular class, yeah, Java is totally an object-oriented language. What you're going to find is much of the stuff that you learn from C# you'll be able to directly apply without even having to change a whole heck of a lot. All right, some of it will be quite a bit different. All right, and we are still going to be using Git and GitHub. All right, so I've sent you guys this before the semester started, but that's the book that we're going to be using. There are code labs in there. I'm not sure, if we're going to be doing the code labs or not. I'll tell you what, if you want an A in this class, if you do those code labs, you'll get an A in this class. All right? Let's see. This one we're not going to be using in here, but this one here that says Advanced Android Development, that's part 2 of the book that we go through, just so you know. So when you finish this, if you wanted to take a look, you could. The idea, as far as I'm concerned, today we're going to write simple Java. All right, and we're going to write. In fact, some of it's going to seem like, are you kidding? No, we're going to, because I want you to see how to do this stuff. All right, then when we get to a certain point, I'm going to give you an assignment that's going to be due tomorrow. Now, with that said, you're going to have time today to work on it. I'll give you time tomorrow to work on it too. It's not like, geez, I got to go home and work on this for hours tonight. No, and it's not hard either. And we'll do the same kind of thing tomorrow. My hope is by either Monday or Tuesday of next week, we'll be taking a test, a hands-on test just on Java. Then we're jumping right into Android. And everything we do after that is going to be Android. But we're using Java to write our Android. All right? And the way I plan on doing this, if somebody told me that you're going to write somewhere between 10 and 30 applications in here, I'd believe that. Also, and I can talk to you guys about this. I think I overwhelmed this online class this morning because, any questions? No, whatever. But in this class, one of the things that you are required to do is a semester project. And it's going to have to incorporate basically everything we cover for the entire class. So you can start thinking about it right now. I've had people who've created games. I've had people who have done budget types of things, to-do types of things, etc. I mean, I don't want it to be something where you can just, oh, yeah, that's so good. I'll just go and Google this, and yeah, I'll just do that. That's not learning. Come on. And you'll be graded on a lot of different stuff, and we'll talk about that later. Now, to do that, one of the things that you have to do, and it's worth about, I don't remember, it's worth 10% or 15% of your grade, is you have to actually go and submit this to the Google Play Store. And in order to submit something to the Google Play Store, there's a one-time $25 fee. All right? And it is. There's no getting around it. There's no class type of fees. I have never asked him to pay for it for the class. I don't think he'd do it anyway, to be honest with you. All right? But just so you know, that's what we'll be looking at. So you can read this stuff yourselves. But basically it says we're going to learn Java, and then we're going to use Android Studio, and we're going to make Android apps with Java. All right? So this is all the stuff that's in here. Now, I don't expect a lot of this that's in here to make sense. Now, when it says utilize widgets, a widget in an Android program is a button, a label, a text box. Those are widgets. All right? By default, when we get into this next week, we'll be using a default layout that's called a constraint layout. but there's 3 or 4 other ones. In fact, there's more than that. You can even download layouts if you want to. And then we'll talk about the styles that are inbred, so to speak, inside of Android and how you can create your own if you want to do that. All right? Yeah, you will be demonstrating Java and object-oriented programming principles, all this stuff, all that stuff. Gradle I'll have to show you. It's one thing to tell you what it is. It's another thing to show you what it is. All right? And the I.O. stuff, well, I'm not that concerned with I.O. like file I.O., but this is also going to involve, we're going to be doing database stuff in here. All right? And again, you will be utilizing Git as mentioned. Okay. So, a couple other things that I'm supposed to mention in here. Again, we meet 5 times a week, so 6 is the maximum number of days. All right? And Gabriel will tell you this. I don't mean to pick on him, but because he had COVID last year, so he got kicked out of the class. He was never kicked out of the class. You know, she talked to me. Crystal called me right away, our VP. And she said, hey, you know, what's going on? I said, hey, the guy's a good student. She goes, oh, COVID and good student? Okay. She said, he'll hear about his appeal real quick. You know, so I knew there wasn't going to be any kind of problem. But, I mean, and like I was telling the online class this morning, and there's no joke. Well, 4 or 5 years ago, I had a student, Christopher Hardy. He was on his way here, and he got hit. His car got hit, and he broke his leg, and he got, by his own admission, he was kind of screwed up for about a month. But we worked around it, and I'll do that with you guys, too, if I have to. So, all right. If for some reason, so let's just say, like Thursday, they said probably just a dusting, but let's just say it isn't, and we get a foot, and there's, you know, I can do this from home. And if I do this from home, I just have to set up a class with you guys in it on Teams. And those guys, none of them had ever heard of Teams before, and everybody who came to class today had no problem with it. Okay? All right. Yeah, the same kind of thing. I'm supposed to be really, he hits me on this. He'll walk by and look in here. And it's like, if you walk in 2 minutes late, he'll go and look and make sure I give you a tardy. Because he can go and look at all my stuff. He's done that before. So, all right. Assuming you're not going to cheat. Again, this is the way that it's set up. So notice half is on hands-on tests and your final project. All right. You might find there's even going to be more tests in here because I don't like to go over. Some of the stuff is so different when you go from one chapter to the other. But when I give you tests, by and large, I'll try to probably give you tests like on a Friday, give you all Friday to work on it. It won't be due till the end of class on Monday. That kind of thing. We'll do that as best we can. All right? All right. You all know who Patrick is, so I don't have to hit you on that stuff. If you haven't done this, especially for you three, if you haven't done this yet, you should go out to the Rankin website and find that Rankin connection. All right, if you haven't done that. And what's going to happen then is you're going to end up sending an email out to Janie Summers, who's our kind of our employment rep. And then whenever we get any kind of jobs out there, she'll send them to you. All right. They also, I think, you know, again, I'm not telling you what to do, but I think all 5 of you should go to the job fair in spring in St. Louis. All right. The one that's here, that's your call. But again, this time when we came, my class told me in the morning, they said, all of them said basically, and I guess you guys were in there, there wasn't really much of anybody in there for IT. And that wasn't just our IT, it was IT period. There wasn't a whole heck of a lot. All right, but I think it was 368 they had in St. Louis, and I counted that said either IT or they used the old name, IWT or whatever it is. There were about 25. So, all right. So when we look in here, that was the introduction. You all know where the handbook is, I believe. There is no department handbook. I am supposed to talk to you about this. All right, why? I want to show you. Probably I shouldn't be showing you this stuff, but I am going to anyway. It doesn't really matter to me. So this is my inside Rankin page. So when I go to academics here, and I go out to this class. All right, now for example, this doesn't hurt anything. This will be the grade book. So this is where I'll fill out all the stuff. That's all fine and dandy. And what will be out here, I got to do it this weekend, is I got to fill all that stuff in, the assignments, etc. But what I wanted to show you was, where is it? Oh, it's because it's not there, it's here. Come on, there. For all this stuff, for work ethic, there's a lot of stuff I have to do that I didn't have to do before. I guess I didn't copy in my old one. But I've got to do reports on each one of you. You might have seen that stuff last semester because I think that you get a copy of it as well. So really, if you know, for instance, if you're here all the time, you participate, you do that, that's usually, you know, to me, that's a meets expectations. Now, I'm just not going to lie to you. A couple times, for like these two guys here, they got it exceeds because, you know, James actually was an unofficial, unpaid tutor last semester in the C# class. All right, and I know you went over and above a couple times and you found out stuff that I didn't even know about projects that we were working on. There's absolutely nothing wrong with getting all meets expectations. That means you're meeting expectations. All right, but I've got to fill all that stuff out, and then I got an email the other day. I had to go back and do a survey on each one of you. You know, I'd done all the other stuff, but you know, you didn't do your surveys yet. Okay, so I went back and did that. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into this. You know, and a couple times, maybe none of you care, but a couple people have asked me, what do I do to get exceeds expectations? Then you go over and above, whatever that happens to be. All right, that, you know, helping other people or whatever. I don't know. All right, leave it at that. So you look and it's, what does it say? Create your first programs in Java. So we're going to be using this. If you remember from the C class, the C# class, when we went in and we did console apps, we had write and write line. Here it's print and print line. Okay, but it's used basically the same way. Variables are pretty much going to do the same thing. One of the biggest things, and people didn't like this because there was a transition over, that when you create a string in C#, it's a little s. When you create a string in Java, it's a big S. All right. Other than that, there's ints, there's doubles, there's floats. Again, like I said, there's strings, there's char variables, etc. All right, those are, I just gave you, and there's Booleans, most of the primitive types right there. All right. And the arithmetic operators, the ones that we've dealt with, plus the plus, the plus equals, minus equals, times equals, etc. Same kind of stuff if you want to use those. All right. So when you look at that, yeah. All right. Now I've got here for an assignment I've got this tomorrow, Java, BMI, I guess, etc. And I've got due Tuesday. No, I just moved it up. But if you want to sit and complain about that and you need more time, it's not. I don't think it's going to be a big thing. But that's fine. So that said, what I'd like everybody in here to do then, please, is start up IntelliJ IDEA. It's up to you. I've got both a shortcut here, and I've got it on here. I'd suggest you do one or the other, but you do it whatever way you want to do it. All right? It's going to bring it up here. Now, I've already got this payroll, but I've removed it. That's why it's gray right there. So we're going to come in here, and we're going to do new project. All right? And it comes in. Now, I'm asking. I think I asked this last time, but I want to make sure. Do you all have something like this up here where it's not empty? Okay, because if it was empty, that means you never downloaded the Java development kit, the JDK. So you'd have lots of problems. All right, basically nothing would work. All right, we're not using Groovy. We're not going to do Kotlin, at least right now. You'll notice that it's set on Java right now. So just click the next button. All right, we're not going to be doing anything from a template in here. So again, just leave all those blank and click the next button. Now it's asking for a project name. All right, this is very similar to the solution that we created in C#. So I'm going to come out here and I'm going to write payroll, just payroll. All right, I may have one. I don't think I have one here that's called payroll, so we'll see. So I click finish. All right, and don't worry about this. I'll let this stuff work for a bit. But if you look over here, there it is. So they just created that folder for me. All right, and when I open it up, it's already got a bunch of stuff in it. Okay, there might even be more. It might still be loading. I don't know. What we're going to care about always is what's in here. And this will also ring true when we transition over next week to Android Studio. It's going to be the source folder that we care about. All right, so let me just ask this. Does everybody's screen look pretty much like this? Yours might come up and show you those tips like this, and if you don't want it, just turn them off right away. Okay. This is going to look similar to the way your screen and everything is going to look when we get into Android Studio. There's two reasons that I'm having you use IntelliJ instead of doing this in Android Studio. One, doing in Android Studio because you work with activities and stuff, which we haven't talked about, is a pain in the butt in here when you're doing just straight Java. The other is, I was reading an article, and there are still more people out there that are using IntelliJ for their Android than are using Android Studio. All right, so we're going to come in here. You'll notice if I do come in here and I go down to source, and there's nothing in it basically. All right, so I'd like you to take your mouse, single click on where it says source, single left mouse click on it, then right mouse click on it, choose new, and go over to Java class. If I did it too fast, just look up on the screen. It's the top one on both of them. All right. Now, they ask you for the name. The reason that this is going to be important is not today, either tomorrow or Friday, we're going to also create an interface file. All right. But you'll see that by default, it's a class. We're going to create a bunch of simple iterations of a payroll class so I can show you some of the major features that are in here. Okay. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to call this payroll 01. And again, the recommended way of doing this is going to be a class. Class names start with a capital letter. They have no special characters in them. They have no blank spaces in them. And if you run two things together, if I was going to call this payroll app 01, the P in payroll and the A in app would both be capitalized. Questions on that? All right. So once that's in there, just hit enter. And you should get something that looks like this. The other day when I did this, it worked just fine. All right. I want to change my... Yeah, it says use the command mouse wheel. Of course, that didn't work. Otherwise, go to Editor General. That's probably what I'll have to do. Dang it, come on, where are you? Edit. Oh. I'll tell you what. I'm going to start typing, and then I'll move it over to something else until I can find what that is. Now, I want to show you some shortcuts. Okay? What we want to type in, don't type this. What we want to type in is this. Public, static, void, main, and main is in all lowercase, and we want to say string, bracket, bracket, args. Now, you could type that in. Okay, and I don't know what's wrong with that, but you don't have to. There's a shortcut for it. If you notice, public static void main is PSVM. See that? You type that in, type in PSVM and hit tab. It fills it in for you. And the reason I got that error before is I made the dumb error of making string with a lowercase s instead of an uppercase s. There are a bunch of shortcuts like that in this language. When we come up with them, or when we look at them, I will show them to you. Okay? Dang it, I've got to do this. What did that say? See, it says select change font with the command and mouse wheel. That must not be set right now. It was. Do Control Alt S. Okay. Okay. Brought up that. Editor General. See this change font size with mouse wheel right there? It's up at the top. That's what I want. Now I should be able to come in. There we go. That's what I wanted to do. All right. And I'm taking for granted that's big enough that you can all read that now, correct? Okay. All right. So the first couple of these that we write, we're just going to have a main. As you'd probably guess, very similar to the way that we did it when we wrote console apps in C#, we'll eventually call routines. All right, but for now, we'll just keep it real simple. All right. So you've done this kind of thing before, so we're going to do string. No, it is big S. String. First name equal, and put your first name in there. Put in mine, I don't care. All right, and here's where I'm going to start showing you different things. Okay, now, I can do this. There's nothing wrong with doing that, right? It'll work just fine. The range for an age is -4 billion plus to +4 billion plus. So, what you might want to do, you don't have to, but what you might want to do here is, like, for example, make it a byte. And why? Because that's got a range of 0 to 255, which is a little bit more in range. All right? So I'll do that, and I'll just set it to my age. All right? Now, I'm going to start showing you where some of this stuff is going to be a little bit different. Just a second. First, it's not bool anymore. It's the whole word Boolean. All right? So we'll come in here and we'll say the person, like, I don't know, we'll say is union. And we'll say true. Again, you can put anything you want here. We're not turning these in. Just a few of these things that I wanted to show you here. All right? So we'll come in and we'll say, now, just so you know, there is no decimal type in here. See that? Like there is in C#. And even though it's kind of a waste of space, what, you know, if I come in here and I want to create, for example, hours worked. Okay, I'm just going to call it hours. Most people make it a double. So I'm going to make a double hours, and I'm just going to say that I worked 40.0 hours. And I'm going to make another double, and I'm going to say rate, and I'm going to say that I make $25 an hour. And one more double, and I'll call it gross. Now I can do this, and then come down here and say gross equals hours times rate. Nothing wrong with that at all, but it's probably simpler to do it like that, right? I mean, it makes more sense once it's been set. Now, I do want to show you something. You don't have to type this, you don't have to change this, but I want to show you something. What's the difference between a double and the other type that's in here, which is of type float? There's two differences. One is that doubles are supposed to be more precise to about 15 decimal digits, whereas floats are to about 7. Well, if you're working with dollars and cents, why not just use float? It's the other difference. It's not a big thing, but if I came in here, let's just say I was going to call it hours worked. Notice if I come in here and say 40.0, I get an error. Because if you use floats, you've got to either preface it with a big F or a little f. Just like when you use decimal in C#, you've got to put an M in there. The same type of an idea. So most developers that I know, they're like, forget it, it ain't worth it. So they make everything doubles. It is, I think it's like an 8-bit versus a 4-bit type of, type of thing. So it's you are wasting some space. All right. All right. So we could type in this right now, just so you see this. So I could type in system.out.println, and I could start printing stuff. Not a problem, right? But if you look, here's another shortcut for you. I think it's SOUT, and it puts that in for you. See that? These aren't big things, but I mean, to me, it's kind of nice. All right? And you don't have to do this. You can do it any way you want. So you can just start printing stuff if you want, or you can come in here and do something like this. I'll have a string. I'll call it output, I'm going to set it at first equal to the empty string, and then I'm going to start filling up. So I'm going to say output equal first name plus first name plus \n. And even though it's not what I want, I'm going to go and copy that, a bunch of times. 4, 5, 6, 7 times. So I'm going to change all these, as you'd probably guess. And all of these other ones will be plus equal. Except for the first one. I could make the first one a plus equal to, it doesn't really matter. So this will be last name. What else do we have in here? So that's age. Is union. It's a little bit, it's not hard, but there's a little bit more work, and there's different ways that you can do it with hours. You know, we don't have the nice little thing like a two-string and converting it to a currency with a C. There's nothing like that in here. I'll get into what that is, just not this second. All right, so hours. So what does it give me here? Oh, anybody know why I'm getting this error? Want to take a guess? Because I am missing, somehow I removed that other curly. Okay? If I've got two beginning curlies, I need two ending curlies. All right? And I'm not going to run it yet, but I'll do a file, save all. Okay? And if you're there, click Run. Up on the menu, go down to Run Here, and choose Payroll 1. And it should come up down here someplace if it worked. If I screwed, there it is. Okay. Anybody have any problem getting that to run? Speak now or forever hold your peace. So again, this is the whole thing from the top. You know, and just like we had in C#, we can come in here, variable, declarations. You'll notice the coloring's a little different. All right. Here strings are green and comments are gray. And there's different kinds of comments that you can make as well. Gets a little bit hinky the way that it's set up, but you know, it is what it is. You can do this if you want to. You of course don't have to. Could care less. All right, so there's the variable declarations, and there's everything else. So again, I can come in here if I want to, line things up nice and pretty. Question? Anybody not understand any of this? Does everything in here make sense? Yes.
When you hit Run, was that from the Run tab in the first
Okay,
version?
okay, good question. All right, so when you get this, two things. First of all, the first time you run it, you got to do a run and then go down to this run, because everything else will be grayed out. Once you've done it and it worked, now you can click here. If you look up on the screen, you can click it here, you can click there, you can click there, you can click Run, and then you'll have that, won't be grayed out anymore, or there. So there's 5 different ways that you could do it.
For me, when I get that second option, I get edit configurations, and then I do not have a further option.
So you're saying that you went to run, and then to here,
Yes.
and you had edit configurations, and that's it?
Yes.
And when you originally got into here, you had the JDK loaded, you said, right?
Yes.
And I'm going to have to Google it to find out, because I've never seen that happen before.
I might walk up real quick just to make sure everything looks correct. This is a little bit small. I might check with them to make sure.
So what do you want?
I'm just going to make sure. I was like, mine looks like yours, so I'm not sure what the issue is. I just don't have that option of payroll 1.
Yeah, I've not seen that before. I mean, if yours looks like this, one thing you could do just to be sure is to go down to the bottom of it and drag and make sure it's not being hidden. But if you say no, it's not, it's just not there, then I will have to take a look at it. I don't know what it is.
Should this be inside another folder?
No, what we did this. We went in, when we created the project is called payroll.
Yeah.
Then inside of payroll, we created a class file under source. It has to be under the source folder.
That might be it.
Okay. Then I would grab everything that you have and just copy it to the clipboard, then open up under the source folder, create a payroll 01 and just paste all that back in.
That should do it here. Thank you.
How are we doing the print line?
The shortcut, or what?
Yeah, what's the shortcut again?
SOUT.
SOUT?
And then hit tab. Now, you maybe already guessed this. We may have gone over this before in the C# class. I don't remember. But there are 3 systems here. There is a system out, there is a system in, and there is a system error. Just so you know, there's 3 of them. By default, unless told otherwise, all of them are basically your terminal. Does that make sense? So the system in, it's getting it from the machine. System out, it's throwing it out on the machine. System error, it's throwing it out on there. The reason that becomes important is if you are working on an application, and with that particular application, you are hooked up to a mainframe, let's say, but you're running your stuff from your own machine, your system error is not going to be going to your machine. You're going to be sending it out to another machine someplace. Does that make sense? All right. Any questions at all on this one? Anything?
I don't think mine's running correctly.
All right. Yeah, everything's typed in correctly?
Everything's typed in correctly.
You've got it like yours is underneath your source folder too?
Yeah.
Okay, and what's happening when you run it?
So, when I click run, let's get this.
Okay, first of all, make all these plus equals instead of equals.
Okay.
All right, because it's overwriting it every time. But I don't understand what, did it say gross? Yeah, that's why it's.
Everything's correct, so I think
Yeah.
the plus equals
Yes.
is probably the issue. So, let's save. Yep, plus equals is right.
Anybody else? Any questions? Anything that didn't work? All right. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by asking you this question, but if I did, I'd say, what's the problem with this program? And the answer would be, every time you run it, it gives you the same results. Would you agree with that? All right. So I'm going to keep this thing up and open, because I'm going to want to eventually come back here and copy this. Or I could just copy that stuff to the clipboard, etc. But for now, what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to keep this open. You can have as many of these tabs open as you want. But we're going to create a second one. So make sure you're under source. Right mouse click, choose new, Java class, and type in payroll 02. All right. Now, when you do this, FYI, when you do this, there's 2 basic ways. There's more than that, but there's 2 basic ways that you can do inputting. You hear me? There's 2 basic ways. The first one, pardon my French, It sucks. But we're going to do it that way because you occasionally see that out in application code. So why not at least expose you to it so you've seen it? All right? Plus, it's going to give me a chance. I think we're going to get an error when we do this. And believe it or not, that's a good thing because it's going to allow me to show you something. All right? So we're going to come in here and remember that shortcut. So public static void main PSVM and hit tab. So we now got our main. All right? And you know what? I'm just going to go back to the first program and I'm just going to grab all the variables. I mean, I don't want to waste your time by doing something like that. So I don't need that. Here it is. All right. So let me paste that back in. There. All right, so I've got all my variables now, but I'm going to add one more variable. It's going to give us an error. All right, just so you know. I'll show you how to fix it because it's almost remarkably simple to fix. All right, so we're going to come in here, we're going to say scanner. You can call this whatever you want, but I'm going to call it keyboard because that's what we're using. Equals new scanner. You can already see what the problem is here. System.in. And you can see the word scanner is red. All right, why? Because the system has absolutely no idea of what the hell is a scanner. It doesn't know. Now, what we are going to do up above this, don't do this. I'm going to let the system do it for you. But we could come in here and remember the using statement that we had in C#? Here it's an import statement. All right, sort of like the import that we had when we were working with the node stuff. All right. But it's an import statement. Now, we could come in here, I'm not going to type it in, but we could type in import space java.util, all in lowercase, all of that, dot scanner with a big S, semicolon, that error would go away. But I'm going to see if it fixes it here. All right. Look on the side here. You see a bunch of dashes that are gold? Those are warnings. They're telling me that I'm not using any of these variables. You with me? It's saying you're not using any of them. But if you look down at the bottom, there's a red one. Right down here, if you look on the screen. Okay? And if I take my mouse and click on that one, it says, wow, look, you're missing that file. Do you want to put it in? So if I hold down on my Alt key and I hit Enter, it says, what do you want to do? I want to import the class. And boom, it put it in there for me. The advantage of doing that is especially advantageous if you're a bad speller, because it always puts it in there for you. Now, there's going to be certain things that we're going to work with when we get into Android. It's going to be done the same kind of way, but you might think, no, it's a hell of a lot faster for me to just type those in. You can do that. I don't ever do that. I let it come up and give me all these different warnings and errors, and then I go back in and fix them by the same way that I just showed you. But you do it whatever way you're more comfortable doing it. So now I've got warnings. Why? Because again, I'm not doing much of anything. I'm going to show you now, I'm going to start typing some stuff in. You can look this up, but I guarantee you this is the only time this semester you're going to see scanner, because I think it stinks. All right? But again, you may see it out there. I don't think you'd really see it in a regular application, but it's not impossible. All right, so we're going to start with the first one. So we're going to say in here, like we did before. So let's see. No, we didn't do that before, so we're going to do it now. All right, so we're going to say system.out.print instead of print line, and I'm going to say enter first name. Again, when we did this, stop what you're doing for a second and go back to here. Print line, as I mentioned, is like write line that we had in C#. Now we're doing a print, which is like a write, because we want to make sure that our keyboard stays on the same line. I think it looks very poor to go and ask somebody something and then drop down a line or two and then have them put it in. I just don't think that's very professional looking. All right? And one of the things, I'm just telling you this in advance, that you're going to be graded on when we get to that point, when you're doing your final project, is how professional it is. All right? And I'm not saying that if you follow every single step Jeff Scott gives you, your thing is damn professional. but it's going to be a hell of a lot more than if you don't. All right? And you're going to come up with your own ways of doing things. For instance, for years, I would never put that on the same line. It was just in me. I always hit enter. Now I've gotten to the point, I don't give a damn. I really don't. But I don't care how you do stuff like that. But all I'm telling you is get used to being consistent. When I'm talking to employers, when they do ask, sometimes they're making you come in and take a test where you have to write code. Other times they're asking, they're going through, hey, can I see all of the stuff on your repo? All right, and they're looking for all sorts of stuff. You never know who's going to be looking at it. All right, and to be honest with you, to me, something like this, whether you have this on this line or on a new line, is just stupid. Which says to me that, and I say this, I got to watch how I say it because I have nothing but respect for our HR person. She's one of the best, hardest workers I've ever seen in my life. I ask her a question, I get an answer like that. But that said, I wouldn't want to be running code by her because I don't think she knows code. But with you never know with an IT manager or programmers, they probably don't care how you put your curlies in. But the higher up you go up, typically up the managerial chain, that's the kind of stuff they're looking for because they don't understand the other stuff. All right, so we got that. Now, so this is going to say enter your first name. This is where, to me, it starts to break down. So I'm going to say here, first name equals. Now, I say keyboard. What is that? That's my name for my scanner object, right? It's the alias or whatever you want to call it. Dot next line. This is how you handle strings. What you're going to find out in just a minute is the other ones you don't handle the same way. All right? So this is going to tell us to read it in. This is just like if we did a write statement that said enter first name, and down here we said first name equal read line, like we were doing in C#. It's pretty much the same thing. All right, now I'm going to grab this and do the same thing, but with the last name. All right, and what did we have next? Next was the H, and it was a byte. All right. So now it's, again, oops, let's grab this. So enter age. And again, it's not, is it that terrible? No, but you've got to remember which one is which. So it's age equals keyboard dot, notice, if you looked on the screen here, keyboard, what's it trying to show me here? See the next byte? It knows pretty much what I'm supposed to put in here. So dot next byte, all right? So that handled strings and that handled bytes. All right, what was next? The Boolean. Now, you're also to the point, too, where you do this. Again, I have to always watch how I say this, not to you guys, but assume your audience isn't the most educated. How's that? So I would put in here true or false. Something like that. See what I'm saying? I mean, all you can do is tell them what they're supposed to be doing. And if they're not going to do it, if they're that uninformed or whatever you want to call it, okay, that's wrong here. There's not going to be that much you're going to be able to do about it. All right? And in all seriousness, I have written applications for people before where I have left that off. Well, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. Okay, and it's just the way it is. So, is union equals keyboard dot, notice right away when I started typing in next, notice the first one, next Boolean. All right. Age, 1, 2, 3, 4, next are hours and rate. And again, you might want to come in here. Let's look at this right now. You're advanced enough, people. All right, so let's go back up to the top of our program here. And before we put in our variable declarations, you've done this in many languages already. Let's put in here constants. Constants. All right, now, with constants, it's not the word const anymore. It's the word final. So final, all right, and we'll say final double min hours equals 0. You've gone through this kind of thing before. Final double max hours equal 84, or whatever you want to set it to. Final double min rate, set that equal to 0. Final double max rate, we'll set that equal to 99.99, something like that. Again, put anything you want in there, or just make them all 0. It doesn't really matter. I'm just trying to run through some of the quirks, whatever you want to call it in here, I don't know. So, first name, last name, age. Well, what about age? All right, do we want to do that for age as well? We very well might. So, I'll come in here and do my final. That'll be an int. We'll call it min age. Let's say to work at this place, you have to be at least 21 years old. All right, you say, hey, what about 18-year-olds? I don't care. And we're going to say the max age, we'll have it equal to 130. That should be big enough, I would think. All right? And why am I doing this? Because again, and you've seen this again and again, we'll put an if statement in here. All right? And we'll check on this stuff. So we've got a minimum age, a maximum age. This is one language. Unlike some of the stuff we looked at in Java, most of your constants still are in uppercase. All right? If you don't make them uppercase, program will work just fine. But again, we talked about this before, that basically putting them in an uppercase sends that subliminal kind of message out, all right, that it's a constant. It shouldn't be changed. It can't be changed, type of an idea. If for all these, if you wanted to make these 0.00, it really and truly is not going to matter. All right, the system will handle it fine either way. All right, so we did this thing with age, and let's come down here. This is just to kind of get you back into the groove, so to speak. And I'll say while age is less than min age, or age is greater than max age. And let's just have them do it again. Make sense to everybody? All right, and I'll put similar things in there then for, I could do it for union status. I could check and say if it's, maybe that'd be a good thing to do too. If you didn't put in true and you didn't put in false. All right, so let me grab this code that's right here. And it's good because it actually lets me show you something here. So that's good. All right, so here we've got is union. So you would think it's is union if it's not equal to true. Don't type in this because it's wrong. Even if it takes it, it's wrong. If it's not this, and let's see if it's, listen to this, or that would be an and. And let me just copy this so I don't screw it up. All right. In fact, I think that this one will work, but if for strings, it's different. That'll be fine. So if that's the case, again, I'm just going to ask you to do it again. All right. Is there anything that's up there that anybody needs any clarification on? Does it all make sense? All right. Because I'm going to show you something else in just a second. You're not going to type it in. I just wanted to show you something. So right now, we're not doing anything. So anything they put in for the first name or the last name, even if it's blank, it's going to go in. Does that make sense to everyone? Because there's no validation being done. On our age, if we put in a number that's less than 21 or a number that's greater than 130, we should ask you to do it again. Does that make sense? Now, just like we had in C#, there's try, catch, and finally in here. We're not going to get in there right now. So the point is, if it asks for the age and you put hello in there, your program is going to blow up. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. So we got our union status. Okay. So now we've got hours. Now, you know this. I could put this in here. Don't type, but I could type in this. What did we say? It was 0 to 84. And that's just fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. Except, what if in the future that changes? And you have to work a certain number of hours. 0 doesn't work anymore. So, since we have up here, we've got our min hours and our max hours, and notice how these have gone black, and where the other ones are still gray, because these are being used now and these are not being used yet. All right? So, when we come in here, we could also go enter hours. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt, but I could say plus, get rid of that, put a parenthesis in there, plus min hours, min hours, plus, and you can hit enter, you can put it over multiple lines, it'll make it easier for you guys to see. Do it like that. And I'll put in here dash plus X hours. All right, plus the colon and the space. Does what I just did make sense? All right. That way, if we do change min hours or we do change max hours for whatever reason, all we have to do is recompile the program, and it'll have the right numbers in there for us. Okay, without us having to go back in there and make changes. All right. So you already know this, hours is a double, so hours equal keyboard dot, and notice it's showing it here next byte, but we want next, dot next double. All right, and we can do the same thing that we've been doing. In other words, we can come in here now and say while hours less than max hours or hours greater than, that should have been min, sorry, or hours greater than max hours. And again, we can just come in here then and ask them to do it again. So I'm going to grab all this. Got that in there. Now, I'm going to grab this whole thing, because rate's the same thing. I just have to change every instance of hours to rate. Does that make sense to everybody? But if you're going to do that, because it really isn't the greatest of ideas, but if you are going to do that, then you better make sure that you change all of them. All right, so there's that one for hours. Now I'm just going to come in here and change this to rate. And what else? Then there's just gross. Well, gross, there's nothing to do here. So gross equal hours times rate. And then I should, let's see, can we come back and copy all this? This thing we did before, this string output, see this? I'm just going to copy that whole thing. I don't know if I declared it up here or not. Yes, I did. So there it is. So, I mean, we're up to 70 lines, but at the same time, we've provided some validation in the program. All right? Now, again, I'm not going to go into it at this time, but we will go into it, if not at the end of this week, at the beginning of next week. And we will talk about, not only will we use exception handlers with try catch, I will show you how to write your own exception handler. All right? So, I mean, let's, remember the classic that we did? You've all done this in the JavaScript class where we did like a miles per gallon. There is no built-in exception in any language that I know of that's called like miles driven out of range. There isn't anything like that. Now, there usually have like an out of range exception, but if we wanted to write our own and have it tailored to just what we're working on, we could do that. All right? So, let's save this. I have no idea if I made any mistakes in here. I don't think I did, but I could have. All right. Well, I didn't run, but I'll try it again. I think I ran payroll 1 again, I don't know. There we go. It was there. So let's try it. Age, I'm going to put in 1. So it just asked me to do it again. All right. And please get used to, I should be preaching to the choir by now. Our minimum age is 21, right? So I can put in a number like 1, but check 20 and check 21. Check the bottom that's just below it, check the top that's just above it. If we said 131, so I'm going to come in here and say 20, doesn't take it. 131, doesn't take it. In fact, it gave me an exception in here. All right, why did it give me an exception? I believe, and that's on me. Look on the screen if you would. I know it's kind of hard for you guys to see, but I think that a byte like this is a signed byte, so it only goes up to 127. It's negative 127 to a positive 127. So I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to change the maximum age. I'm going to change this to 120. And it should work then when I do that. We'll find out in just a second. All right, so now notice it asked me what I wanted, and I put in Bob for the union status. All right, and it broke. You're going to see these exceptions. Now notice it's an input mismatch exception. What does that mean? It means it's expecting it was set up, it was declared as a Boolean, so the only two possible values are true and false. So what do you do? Well, that's where we're going to have try catch, and we'll bring that stuff in, like I said, in a little bit. All right. Anybody have any questions? Need anything here shown? Anything that doesn't make sense?
Whenever I typed I was doing this one, I'm not sure if we covered it just yet, but when I typed in true or false into the union part, it just continued doing it.
Okay, well then let's take a look over here and make sure that I did mine right. So, is union, is next Boolean. The true and false have to be all in lowercase for both.
Alright.
All right. So while it's not equal to true and it's not equal to false, that should say anything other than that. It should ask you to do it again. But if you do put in, let me try mine. As far as I know, mine works, but we'll check.
If we type in true or false, it'll just repeat it, but anything else it breaks it.
All right, so let's see. Mike took it. I did see where I screwed up something here with my parentheses. I should have a parenthesis there and there. Not that that's a big thing. But,
I think I see something. If I go into the while function, it says condition is union not equal true, and after that it's always true.
well, up here, we did set it up here to true, all right? So we could have, with all these that are in here, we, unless, do we have a Boolean in here? Next byte, next Boolean. Here, enter union status. It should be resetting it. So what we really could do in here is we could come in and set all these. That probably should now be the empty string. That should be the empty string. That can be 0. This can be false. This can be 0, and this can be 0. All right, this gross can also be 0. Those, just so you know, if you don't look up on the screen here, these are the defaults. In fact, I may end up getting, if you look over here, see all these? It's going to tell me that it's redundant. See that? Because really the way they want you to do it is just like this. And you'll notice that now doing it like this, all those are gone. All right. Now, so why did I do it the other way? All right. And I will tell you that it's the older programmer in me, and that is if something is screwed up, coming back and saying it's not my fault, that should have been the default. Management could give a darn. It's your fault. So I'd rather do that, and I don't have age 0 here. So I'd rather put it in there and even get the warning. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is, that's why a lot of code, when you look at it, when you run these really big programs, they may have hundreds of warnings. Because people are used to writing their code in a certain way. All right, I probably even told you about this, but I don't know if I did or not, but I'll always remember that when I was working at AT&T, one of the first jobs that they gave me was doing some maintenance work on code. And there were about 15 errors. I got them all out. And then I said, there's like about 200 warnings in here. You want me to fix those? And right away my boss says, does the code work? Yeah, then leave it alone. Part of it probably is because I was a brand new guy. He's afraid I was going to break something. I get that. But the other thing is, there are warnings. All right. Questions?
Can I see the last part of the code?
This thing? All right, it is 1:15, so let's take a break. Let's come back at 1:30. And now, next I'm going to show you, it's a good and a bad. It's a better way of writing it because it's much more intuitive, but it involves a little bit more work. Because the way we're going to do it next, it assumes everything's a string. So you've got to convert the stuff. Remember we used the convert? It's not going to be convert anymore, but we're going to be doing the same kind of thing. All right, so let's come back at 1:30, please. All right, we're going to continue on, and let's make a third one. So let's come up to source again, new Java class, and we'll make this payroll 03 in uppercase. All right, and it'll have a lot of the same stuff that we had before. Now, just to show you that we can do it this way, I'm going to include what we're going to do here. All right. Now, you may or may not remember this. I think you will. But, when we worked with C#, you use message boxes, right? All right. And that's how you would a lot of times show output. I don't know if I did it with both groups or with one group or if I didn't do it with either groups. with either group rather, but you can also go in and add a reference to Visual Basic. And if you do that, Visual Basic has got an input box. Kind of like when we would do, we would use the prompt basically, what we used in JavaScript. We're going to use those now. All right? And to use that, we're going to have to import something. And just to show you that we can just import it ourselves, I'm going to import java.swing.j option pane. Option pane. I think that S has got to be capitalized. Nope, it doesn't like. Java, oh, it's Java X. There's a little S. And that's good because it'll give me a chance to talk about something else after you put that in. To my knowledge, when Java was first created, all right, their mantra was write once, run everywhere. So the idea was that you could write something for your laptop, and you could run it on a mainframe. You'd have to recompile it, but that's it. You wouldn't have to make any changes. All right. Then the real bad joke went around. Write once, run anywhere. That's W-O-R-E. War, right? But for some reasons, people started calling it whore. All right? So then it changed to write once, run anywhere, because wara didn't mean much to anybody. So why? Who cares? Well, I want to tell you that back in the, quote, olden days, like maybe 15, 20 years ago, even though the mantra was that not only should it be able to run on any machine, but it should look the same whether you're using, for example, a Mac or a Windows machine. They should look the same. They didn't. They still don't, but they look much more similar than they used to. And part of the reason is, you probably know this already, but like with Macs, by default, their buttons are got a little bit of rounded. They got some border radius on them, basically, where in Windows, they don't. And that bothered people, that there was, it would look quite a bit different. So what happened was, they decided they weren't going to go back and redo everything, but they were going to make extensions, for lack of better words, for what they had. That's the Java X. So anytime you see anything with a Java X on the end, it's swing. And the idea behind it was supposed to come in and make stuff be truly as possible look the same on any kind of a machine. All right. There's more stuff too. Swing are typically lighter weight components as far as the way that they're actually set up, so they will take up less space, etc. There's a few other things like that, but they're not really that important. All right, so I'm going to start by coming back over here and grabbing all those variables again. I'll grab everything, make it look pretty much just like the last one. So I'll grab the constants, and I'll grab the variables. The only variable we don't need now is that scanner. You don't want that scanner because we're not using that now. All right? Oh, and what did I screw up? Forget I did this. It's gone now. PSVM, right? Public static void main. Then paste it in. All right? So I've got all that back. Same stuff I had before. All right? Now, I'm just going to do one of these right now, and we're going to run it so you can see what it looks like. With me? All right, so I'm going to come in here. We'll just do the one for the first name right now. Now the good news is, what is it? It's just a string, right? So there's nothing special we have to do here. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so I'm just going to save this just so you can see it. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to come in and do a run on it. See this? Can you see that? Enter first name. All right. That's like a prompt that we've had before. Okay? So like, you know, I put Jeff in there, doesn't matter. The program's done now. So I've got that. So I'm just going to copy this line, and that'll be my last name too. Okay, now is where it starts to change a little bit. All right. So the problem is here, like I said, we want to do the equivalent of some kind of a conversion. But every time we read something in, it's read in as a string. Does that make sense to everybody? So I've got this string in here that I call output. I'm going to create another one up here that I'm just going to call input. And everything that I read in here that's not a string is going to be read into input. Are you with me? All right. Not that you have to do it this way. To me, this is just kind of a way to do it that sort of makes sense. So input equals, and I'm not going to worry this time about running all of the tests, etc. You can do that if you want to, but I'm more concerned with getting through this. So enter age. And we'll even cheat here. We'll say whatever it was, 21 to 120. Again, that's not really the best way to do that. And I've already told you why, but it's okay. We'll just do it like that. All right. So the problem is I come in there and I put in 65. And guess what? It ain't 65. It's the string 65. Okay? So what I want to do is I want to convert it. So I'm going to say here age equal. Now this is where it looks a little weird because it's byte dot parse byte of our input. All right. This is called a wrapper function. W-R-A-P-P-E-R. Because what we're doing here is we are using the byte class on this. And we are telling it to take our string and parse it into a byte. Does that make sense? All right. So that's all groovy or fine, whatever. So we've got now first name, last name, and age. Now we're going to do the same kind of thing. But now we're going to say input equals enter union status. And again, kind of nice to tell them true or false. Something like that. And I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll put this on a new line just so it doesn't there. Okay. And here we'll say is union equal. It's not going to be byte.parse byte now. All right. It's going to be Boolean.parse Boolean. Does that make sense to everybody? It's still, the program is still going to blow up in its current format if I don't put true or false in there. It will still blow up. All right. It won't blow up on this line though, because it's a string. So if I put in hello, it's going to blow up here because it's attempting to parse what I put in there, and it says, okay, it's got to be true or false. If it's not, there's some kind of a problem here. All right. So that should have been hours worked and hourly rate. So enter hours worked, 0 to 84. That should be hours here. Sorry. And then this will be rate. Enter hourly rate. I think that was 0 to like 99.99 or something like that. And that's rate. And then we come down again and do our gross. Equal hours times rate. Okay. Now, I'm just going to grab it from where it is and see if I made any mistakes. So let me go over to run. Let me run it. So enter first name, Jeff. Enter last name, Scott. Again, age. You know, it's going to blow up because I don't have the if statements in there. So I'll just put in a valid age. Hours worked, let's put in 40. And hourly rate, let's put in 40. See, it worked. It's not a problem. No errors or anything like that. Now, what's going to change here a little bit is the way that we're going to output this. All right, so let me go back to here. I can grab it, and like we had it here before, this thing. I can still do this, but I'm going to have to make some changes to that system.outline. Okay? So, I'm going to grab all that. I'm going to paste it down underneath here. All right, and then I want to check and see what changes I want to make. So let's see. What does it look like here for his union? It says has not been initialized. Did I leave that off? His union. I guess I didn't do a union on here. Hours. Okay. I did, but I must have removed it. Yep. Let me get that back. Oops, that's the wrong. Okay, Jeff. Get your head out of your butt here. So this should be union status. Input. First name, last name. Input age. Input union status. So that should be. Right. Should be input, and right here is union equal Boolean parse Boolean of input. That should fix everything. Okay, so I've got all this stuff, and what do we want to do here yet? That's all fine, but change this last line if you would. It'd still work. But we don't want it to print down here. We want it to print in the equivalent of a message box, and it is a little different. J option pane. Oops. Show message dialog. Null. Output is the output. So change that line to this. Now, look at something. Don't type in the word parent component. Did you hear me? These are built-in helpers that get put in by the editor. It's letting you know that that is the parent component. I didn't type that. I only typed in null and output. And if you don't like that, you're going to like it less when we get into Android Studio, because it does it all the time trying to help you. They're called hints for a reason. All right? Let's just see real quick. I want to make sure I'm not giving you anything bad. Okay, and again, it's not formatted at all. We'll talk formatting some tomorrow. Okay, questions on that? Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Now, again, some of this I'm doing. I've got written down. Yes, some of it I'm literally doing off the top of my head because, like showing you the if and stuff like that, I didn't put any of that in here, so I just added it now because it's the same as what you've been doing. Same thing with the while for some of the input validation. All right. questions on anything we've done thus far? Anything that doesn't make sense? All right. That one, we can do that one, and we'll do two. We'll do a couple more. All right, that should be good. All right. So I'm going to come back in here, as we've been doing. I'm going to come over to source, and I'm going to add yet another Java class, and I'm going to call this one payroll 04. Does everybody get the idea that, for lack of better words, this is very similar to what we did in C#, where source here, all right, is the source, and our projects are here. Does that make sense? We could have written a separate thing for each one of these. That would have been fine. All right? It just seems like, since all of these are related, it seems like it makes some sense to do this. All right. Oops. All right. Now we're going to add some formatting. So some of this is going to be a little bit longer. This may take us till our next break. Like I said, we'll do two more, and then I'm going to print out the first program I'd like you to start working on. All right? Okay. So I'm going to grab my constants again, and I'm going to grab my variables again. In fact, I better grab my whole main. I'll just do what I said. Grab the constants and the variables. Oops, that's great, Jeff. Do my PSVM. Paste that in, so I've got that. All right, I'm going to add a couple constants in here. You've seen this kind of thing before, so final. Now, what we're going to have to end up doing, main is static. Make sense to everybody? You may remember this, you may not remember this from C#, but now we're going to add some routines in here. So we're going to call some methods. All right. So all of these things that we created right here, they're going to all have to change to final static, the way that it's written right now. So add that to each one of these. Don't worry that if it's giving you an error, don't worry about that. All right, like I said, right now it's giving us an error, and it's saying modifier static not allowed here. It will be in just a minute, okay? In fact, let's do it the right way. This is everything I just showed you is correct, but grab this. Grab these constants. Constants should really not be declared inside of main. They should be declared up there. Somebody tell me why?
So anyone can reach them?
Yeah, but yes, and it's even kind of more fundamental than that, and that is constants don't change. So where you define them technically does not matter. So it's considered actually good practice to define them at the top of the program with the idea that they can now be used anywhere throughout this class without having to make any changes. Make sense? All right. So we've got all these. Now we're going to, like I said, we'll add some ifs and some other stuff in here. So we'll do a static final, oops, not a final, static final. Final, static, double, max, non-OT. You know what this is, or you should. That's the maximum number of hours you can work without getting overtime, 40. That's just what we're going to assume here. Double. Make that 1.5. So you get time and a half for overtime. All right. We've got all this other stuff. That's fine. Let's add one more. Static int, and it'll be our total number of employees. Just going to call it tot imps. We're going to keep it simple because otherwise you'd have to add too much information. Let's assume we have 3 employees. Is that okay with everybody? You can change this to any number you want. And although I think it will work fine the way I've got it, all right, might as well learn about the editor, because really instead of saying final static, it should be static final. Did you hear me? Really should be. So I'm going to see if I can change that at one time. I'm going to do a control. Nope, doesn't like that. What is it? A control F? Let's see. So if I say final static, and now I come in here and say solution. Oh, I should have gone back and looked again at the how to use this, because I don't remember. So yeah, I'll just manually change them. That's fine. So change all of them so they look like this, please. It'll probably work the other way, just so you know. But putting static first is what's recommended. So I'll change all that. Scrap that. Otherwise, leave it the way it is and see if it still works. And if it does, then the order doesn't matter. But I've always done it this way. All right. Any questions on what any of those things in there are? Anything that doesn't make sense? All right. Let's make a couple. So these are global. Does that make sense to everybody? They're global to this class. All right. Okay. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to make a couple global variables too. So I made some global constants, and now I want to make some global variables. All right, so we're going to come in here and we'll make static, but not final, double equal tot gross pay. Static not equal. Static double tot gross pay equal. This is going to be the total gross pay for all 3 of our employees. Does that make sense? Now, I'm not going to do this, but you could go back and you could make things for highest gross pay, lowest gross pay, max gross, or average gross pay, etc. We're not doing that. All right? But we could. All right, so we got this. Now we're going to come in here. This is going to give us an error. It'll be fixed literally in a matter of seconds. All right, so come in here and do a static. Like I said, we'll fix this, I guarantee it, just a second. We're going to add 2 patterns. One will have a $sign, one will not have a $sign. Okay, not pattern 12, that would be kind of stupid, wouldn't it? There we go. You should already know this, but this is assuming the biggest number we'll have in here is 999,999,999.99. Does that make sense? Every time you see a pound sign, what that means is if we don't have anything that meets that criteria, don't show it. But if for some reason we had somebody who was a volunteer who worked for nothing, okay, let's just say we had that, then it would show 0.00. Does that all make sense? And when you look at this, what's the difference? This will be the format for the hourly rate and the gross pay. This will be the format for the hours worked. Does that make sense? All right. We just did it where we made two different decimal patterns. Did we have to do that? No. But if we only made one, we'd have to manually add the $sign in them ourselves. Okay? Now, you've seen this before, so I'll put my mouse here on the light bulb, and it says, what does it say? Green? No, I don't want that. Oh, why isn't it giving me this? Because that is right. It is decimal format. I don't know why it's not giving me that. But let's go back up to the top. We'll manually put it in. I don't know why it's not allowing me to. Let's import java.text.decimal format. And notice after I put that in right there, see how those errors have gone away? I mean, it's nothing magical. And let's use the J option pane again. So javax.swing.j option pane. Okay? Now that's gray because we haven't used it yet, but we have set up the patterns, the decimal formatting. So that one's not gray. All right? Like I said, we'll go till for a little bit, 2:15 or so, and we'll take another break. All right? Now, technically, when you look at this, it's actually looking the way that it should, in that these are global, because they're used throughout the program. These are global, you could say the same thing. These are local. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. And since they're local, and we're going to be writing a bunch of routines now, all right, we're going to have to pass those values in to our routines. All right, this is all stuff you've done before, but not with this language. All right, so we could say 3 here, because we've got 3 employees, right? But I called it totems. I couldn't remember what I called it. So, less than totems. Right. I'm going to get errors on all these because I haven't written yet input first name, input last name. Does that make sense to everybody? So what am I going to do? I'm going to write the routines, and I'm going to go back to the old program, and I'm going to copy the stuff in. Does that make sense to everybody? Because I don't want us to be here for 2 more hours typing in this code. There's a lot of it we can just grab. None of these need any information, but then we're going to call our gross. You know what the gross is. We want to multiply the hours by the rate, but we want to write a routine to do that. So we are going to have to, so we're going to call here calculate gross, but we are going to pass in both hours and rate. And then we'll just write display all, and we'll pass in first name, last name, age is union. I'll put it over 2 lines so you can read it. Hours, rate, and gross. Okay. Now, if this bugs you, that we've got all this redness, just go back out here and do your /* and your //. And then as we write each routine, look on the screen if you would. As we write each routine, I'll move that comment line down. Does that make sense? All right, because now I'm only going to get one error as opposed to getting 6 or 7 different errors. Now this is the for loop, so I'm going to do this 3 times. When I'm all done, then I want to call display total gross. Again, right now it's red because we haven't written that. Okay? Notice I'm passing in nothing. See this? Why? Because we've defined up here in our global variables total gross pay. So we don't have to pass it. All right. We could have made it local and passed it. It wouldn't really matter. There's a lot of different ways that this can be done. All right. So I'm going to start writing these. Whoops, I'm going to give you a second to type that in before we go on. I want to go through this routine. And I want to return it too. So. Sorry, we just added line 55 there. If you finished and you want to go ahead a little bit, input last name is going to look the same, but just change every occurrence of first to last. All right? But I want to wait and I want to go over this whole thing because it brings up a really important point, something that you have to realize right now. See this line right here? That's how you do string equality. All right? You don't do this. You don't say like fn equal that. You don't do that. That means, literally, don't type this in. This means something else. All right? When you are checking for equality, you use the dot equals with string. If you're using that equal like that, you're asking if they're pointing to the same thing. All right, it'll make more sense when we start talking more about object orientation. So that's this one. Again, I'm going to just grab this whole routine and I'm going to copy it to the clipboard. And then underneath here, I'm going to paste it in, and this will be input last name. And then, you know, ln instead of fn, L. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. And I've had talks with people I've worked with about this. Would you agree, looking at these two routines, and we make this a little smaller here, would you agree that these are basically, that's the same routine? Would you agree with that? One's for first name and one's for last name, but it's the same thing. This could have been done as one routine where you passed in either first name or last name. You see what I'm saying? There comes a time when you have to start thinking about, as a programmer, what's the best way of doing this? All right? I look at it this way. Probably it would have been no harm in doing it as one routine. But if at some time there is ever some differentiation and you want to do something different between first name and last name, all right, then, all right, and what about middle initial? Oh, let's just add that. Okay, so we added another thing for now you can put in middle name, but what if it's an initial? All right, so and what if they don't have a last name, etc. You know, it's, I don't know. So now you'll notice if I do undo this one, now that one's, whoops, now that one is okay. So I've got the first two written. So I've got to do input age is union, etc. Okay? So I'll keep writing this stuff, but I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to write these other 1, 2, 3, 4 routines. All right? So give me about 5 or 10 minutes and I'll write those. Now, if it turns out, you know, like we're going through this, you're like, hey, all this makes sense. I don't need any of this CRAP. Then don't do it. You're not hurting my feelings on it. You're really not. I'm just trying to show you the similarities and the differences between this and other languages you've used. So you put as much of this in there as you want to. Now I can go back, because remember we did this thing with the age, so I can go copy this. So you can do a bunch of copying is what I was saying to you before. So, let's see. That's not what I want. Let's try that. I reverse these. String input equals that. And I copied the wrong one. That's the problem. So I'm going to say enter age. I think we said that was 21 through 120 or something like that. Okay. Okay, we got that. Now, I can do this just like it is, and I can say return age, and it'll work. But now if I come in here and I put in 1,000,000, it thinks that's the age. See what I'm saying? So I can come in here and I can add the while if I want to. Not that I have to, but I can do that. So I will. Now, I do want you to realize, please look on the screen here, this age right here, that's a local variable. That's not technically, even though we're passing it back into here, it's not technically, we're not talking about the same thing. All right? So if it makes more sense, just call it A. You know, a lot of times that's what programmers will do, so they'll just make that A. So there's no problem with understanding it. Either way, it works just fine. All right, so that's the input age. Like I said, we'll finish up this one. We'll take another break. Is there anything in here that doesn't make sense to anybody? All right. like I said, hopefully, I just plan on day one basically as being a lot of review. I know with some of you it's been like, not a year, but pretty, 8, 9 months since you've done any C#. So. All right, so after age we had union. So if you are following along, there's the one for the is union. I'll do the other two in just a second. And of course, the rate of the hours are basically, again, just about the same, just make those changes. Now, on here, on these, oops, jeez Louise, Jeff. On these three, I've got to add the pattern. All right, so it's not hard. I just say here, so this is hours worked, so that's, which pattern is that? The second pattern has no $sign, the first pattern does. So, this is, come on, pattern 2 dot format. Let's spell it right. And this will be pattern 1 dot format. And so will this. Okay. I think that's right. Oh, and there's one last thing. Look on the screen. I commented that out before, but there is the display total gross, which is what we want to do again after after we have gone through all of our employees. So I'll bring this back in just a second, but let's come here and see if we can put it here. So public static void display total gross. Oops. And that's just literally the J option pane line. Let's grab this. Null, and this I'll change around a little bit. I'll have it say like total gross pay plus pattern 1 dot format total gross pay. And guess what? Right now, that's going to give me 0. Can somebody tell me why? Can somebody tell me why right now this is going to be 0?
Are we not adding the rates yet?
It's because before we return the gross pay here, we should have said tot gross pay plus equals gross pay. My error. Okay? Now it should be right. But I mean, you've written a couple hundred lines, or 160 lines here. So we're going to take a break in just 1 second, but before we do, just bring it back up to the top here. So what do we have? We brought in so we can create our decimal format pattern and so we can do our option pane. We've made all of our constants global. We added 3 global variables, and we are using that pattern in more than one method, so it makes sense for that pattern to be global. All right? This hasn't changed. I don't think I'm using input or output anymore, so I actually can get rid of these two things. All right? But now I'm calling routines. So what have we done? We've modularized the program, right? Which is really the way that it should be written. This is, even though it's got 160, 170 lines, it still is a fairly simplistic program. If we were actually doing things where we were figuring out FICA and everything else, we very well could have either more methods than this, or these methods could be a lot bigger than they currently are. All right. So again, there was our input first name. And I just did this to make sure it wasn't empty. You know, did we have to do that? No, but it would look kind of bad to say first name and have nothing there. But I'm not checking for is alpha. I don't believe there is a built-in is alpha in here for I'd have to check. But you could write your own routine. All right. And this routine, like I said, this routine here and this routine here are virtually the same thing. I just changed FN for first name to LN for last name. All right. And other than that, it's the same routine. The age is the same thing we had done earlier. We did the byte.parse byte, but I am doing a range check here to make sure it is, if it's less than 21 or it's greater than 120, we're telling them to do it again. For the union, we're saying here, while it's not equal to true and it's not equal to false, this thing I don't even think is working right, probably. I know you said you had some problems with it. I probably would end up putting that into a try-catch block. All right? So that's the one for the is union. This is the input hours. This is all stuff that we've done in the earlier programs. All right, I'm just rolling it over, so to speak. And after the break, we're going to do one more. Why? Because we're going to add, we're actually going to make this look like a Java program would look. All right, we're going to put some stuff in here. You're going to, what the hell is that? Because you haven't done that before. All right. I don't know, does anybody need me to show you any of this stuff?
Usually gross and this by total gross.
Yeah. So I've got 221. Let's take about 15 minutes and come back, please, at 2:35. I had mentioned this to you before, that if you do go out to goalkicker.com, that they've got a bunch of IT books, and they've got one for Android that's over 1,000 pages, and one for Java, which is over, I think it's 900 pages. All right, and if you do go out there, you'll notice that for the Java one, that's over 900 pages, it's got, 180 chapters. So, in other words, they're more bite-sized chunks than our book is. It's about average of about 5 pages per chapter. And the Android one is literally got 266 chapters in it. And I believe they constantly update this too. In addition, there's a book that I was considering using for this class, but again, Mr. Smith didn't like it. But I found this one online. This is an older version. It's called Professional Android for Application Development. It's actually, now it's almost 10 years old, but there's some good stuff in it. So I will somehow, if you Google that free PDF, all right, you'll find that. All right. I was going to run this just to make sure that indeed it worked. Always a good idea, right? So payroll 4. I'll do it with no overtime. It should say, 50 hours. Yeah, it did have overtime. So that worked, the $1,100. All right, so it's $1,100 for the first employee. $1,600 for the second employee. So that's $2,700 so far. $2,750 for the last one. There's the total gross pay. So it does work. Like I said, I'll put this out there a little later tonight. Now, what we've done so far is we have written 5 programs, all right, or 4 programs. But technically, none of the ones that we've written so far are done in a truly Java-like fashion. All right, that's what we're going to do now. All right, so I'm going to do most of this. It's not as long as the last ones were, but we're going to do this one literally from scratch. I'm not going to copy a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to go and do another class. This will be payroll 05. And this is going to look quite a bit different than the other ones that we've done. All right, there's nothing wrong with what we've done so far, but we really have not been taking advantage of the object-oriented capabilities that are in Java. All right, so that's what we're going to do now. And it's not that I lied, but I am going to take and copy a little bit of the stuff that we used before, because, I mean, to me, I'm going to copy, what did I use here? I'm going to grab those constants. I'm not going to use all of them. Okay. I'm not worried about a final total now, so I'm just going to grab these for now. All right. And I'm going to copy them in here. Now, I'm going to change this around a little bit. Why? Because I didn't want this program to be 300 or 400 lines long. All right. So, I'm going to keep I'm not going to go in here and do a bunch of checks like we did before. So, I'm going to keep the max non-OT. I'm going to keep the stuff that you see in here. I guess if we wanted to, we could keep the hours, we could keep the age, we can keep all that stuff. I mean, it doesn't really matter one way or the other, so I guess we can. Let's just keep it. I don't have it in mind, but we'll put it in there anyway. So those will be our global constants. And then I'm going to have some, I'm not going to call them global, I'm going to call them class variables. All right? And I'm cutting down what I had before, just so you know. I'm going to have first name, last name, hours, rate, and gross. I don't care about union status, etc. Like I said, I just try to keep this so it was somewhat manageable. All right, so let me grab this stuff. I'm going to change this around in just a second, so just give me a second here, okay? So, I don't need a main. I'm actually not going to have a main in here. All right, we're going to write main as a separate file, just so you know that. So you think, oh, you forgot to put main in. No, he didn't. All right, here's our global constants. Here's our class variables. First name, last name, and what did I put in here? Just hours, rate, and gross. All right, so I got rid of all those. Now, when you start to look at this, and really these variable that I put in here, technically, all right, every single employee could potentially, for these fields right here, be different. Would everybody agree looking at the screen? There's especially if you've got a small company, and let's say you're not hiring family. There's a good chance, if we have 10 people, we could have 10 different first names, 10 different last names, etc. Plus, unless they all work the same number of hours, they could technically have 10 different hourly, hours that they work, 10 different rates, which would result in 10 different grosses. Well, that's the way that we're going to do this. All right. Now, we're going to make a couple more changes in here. I could have done these in the earlier programs, but I didn't. All right. We want the stuff that's in this program to only be available in this class. Did you hear what I said? I don't want to be able to share this with the outside world. So, where I've got all this stuff in here, I'm going to add the word private in front of all these. So I've taken my constants and I've made them private. All right. Again, the ramifications of that is that they're only going to be available inside of this class. And I'm hoping that makes sense to everybody. All right. Now, what you'll notice after doing this is these will be private. All right, just like we had before, so I'm going to make those two things private. These right here will be private, but they don't have to be static, because they're going to be different for each employee. So the stuff that's static basically is not changing. This is always going to be pattern 1. This is always going to be pattern 2. This is always going to be the total number of employees, the employee rate, etc. But the other stuff that's in here is not going to change. These are the true class variables right here. So every time I create a new employee object, or whatever you want to call this thing, every time I create a new one, those 5 fields could essentially be different. All right. Now, when we go through and we start to do this, you may or may not remember this from C#, but we're going to put in a constructor. All right? And we're going to actually write a couple different constructors. In other words, they're going to be overloaded. So I'm going to call this my no arg constructor. So in other words, if I go in and I create a new payroll object and I don't pass anything in, I want to make sure I've got something in here for first name, last name, hours, and rate. Does that make sense to everybody? So this will be my no arg constructor. The way we do that here is you type in public and you type in the name of the class. So public payroll 05. And it's not going to have anything in there. All right? So this is when we create a brand new payroll 5 object and we pass it in nothing. But we have to make sure that we give that person a first name, a last name, an hours, a rate, and a gross. Call them defaults. Call them whatever you like. All right? So I'm going to type in here the word this before all these. I wouldn't have to, but it's considered good practice. So I'm going to say this dot first name equals, and I'm going to say FNU, which just means first name unknown. This dot last name equals LNU for last name unknown. And I'm going to default the hours and the rate both to 0. In fact, I can say 0.0 would probably be a cleaner way to do that, but either way will work just fine. So what I want you to understand, all right, what I want you to understand is this. We're not writing a main here. We're going to write main in another file. And in main, it'll say something like this. Don't type this in. I just want to show you the kind of thing that it's going to say. That's all. And that is, we'll type in something like this. Payroll 05, and we'll give it a name, James. James equals new payroll 05. So if we do that, we're not going to get an error. But James's first name is going to be FNU. James' last name is going to be LNU. He'll have 0 hours and 0 rate. Does that make sense to everyone? Now, in just a second, we're going to write another one. And again, don't type this in yet. But we'll say, for example, let's say Nick. And we'll say equals new payroll 05. But here, we'll pass in a first name. We'll pass in a last name. We'll pass, come on, you. We'll pass in a number of hours that we worked and an hourly rate. You see the difference? Now, we're getting those errors because I haven't written that constructor yet. It doesn't understand any of these. It doesn't understand what this is, or what this is, or what this is, or what this is. So, I'm going to come back down here. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it right back in here. But this time, notice I get the error because these two look the same. They have the same signature. So I'm going to say here, string, I'll call it FN for first name, string LN for last name, double H for hours, and double R for rate. All right? And we'll come in here and we'll say this dot first name equals FN, this dot last name equals LN, this dot hours equal H, and this dot rate equals R. Now notice if I go down here, no error anymore. See that? So this is just to show you what it's going to look like. So let me make this a little smaller. So those are the two constructors. Number one is what I call a no arg constructor. And number 2, and I have never heard it put like this, but I just call it a full Arg constructor. And then what I mean by full Arg is we're passing in every class, true class variable that we have. All right? So now when we create a new payroll 05 object, we must either pass in nothing, which means it'll be set to all of this stuff, or we must pass it in 4 things. All right? Now, don't change yours, but I do want to show you something. Don't change this. I'm going to change these back to their names. All right? So I'm going to put in first name. I'm going to put it again. I'm going to change this back in just a second. I'm going to say last name. I'm going to say hours, and I'm going to say rate. Now, if I do it like this, look on the screen. If I do it like this, and this name that I'm passing in is the same as this name here, then I must use the word this in front of it. Because otherwise, I'm just taking this right here, that one that's in blue, and assigning it to itself. All right? That's why a lot of people don't like to give them the first names. They'll just the same name rather. They'll do it like this. Now, I'm going to tell you that, but one or more of you are going to forget it anyway. I do. All right? All right. Now, with this one, we can do this. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing this. Do you sort of see a problem with doing this, though? Again, what if I don't put anything in there for the first name or the last name? And what if I put in something, let's say, out of range for the hours or for the rate? So it'll work as long as I follow all the rules. All right? But who's to say I'm going to follow all the rules? Okay? So we could use this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this. I'm just going to comment it out. In fact, I'm going to copy it first, and then I'm going to comment it out. We're going to actually put this in here 3 different ways, just so you can see the difference between all of them. You start to get into the muck, so to speak, that is this stuff. You can see where it gets to be a little weird. So we're going to say here, it'll be almost the same type of thing every time. So what this is now doing is the same thing the one up above did, but it's doing some verification. So in other words, if we leave it blank, if it's not blank, we'll accept whatever we put in for the first name. Otherwise, we'll set it to FNU. Same thing with the last name. Here, notice I'm inverting what we checked before. I'm checking to see if it's within range. So you can check this stuff any way you want to check it. All right? Now, one thing you may or you may not remember from when we talked a little bit about this, I believe, in the C# class, is remember the concept of getters and setters? And if something is a getter, it's also called an accessor. You're returning the value. If something is a setter, it's a mutator. You're setting the value. So what we want to do is we want to write get routines and set routines for each one of these 4 variables that are right here, these 4. All right? But again, there's a great shortcut so we don't have to go and do all this work. All right? So if you would please take your mouse, put your cursor somewhere around there. You'll see why in just a minute. So put your cursor somewhere around there. All right? So I'm right down near the bottom of the program. I'm going to let the system, I'm going to make changes to it, but I'm going to let the system write my setters and getters for me. And it's not hard. So you right mouse click and you go down to where it says generate, halfway down. And what do you want to generate? Notice I could have generated my constructor here if I wanted to. All right, I don't want to. I'm going to do getters and setters. I could do them individually, but I'm going to do them collectively by choosing getter and setter. Right there. It says, okay, what do you want to do the getter and setter for? Well, not for my patterns, not for those. But I do want to for my first name, my last name, my hours, and my rate, for those 4. Now, go ahead and do that, but my question to you is, does it make sense why we're doing that for those 4? Those are the 4 things that are going to be unique for each employee. And you say, well, so is the gross pay. Yeah, but that's just a formula. What we're inputting, we could be getting this from a database. We could be getting it from just about anywhere. That doesn't matter. All right? But as long as we have in a valid hours and a valid rate, we can be sure we're going to have a valid gross. Does that make sense? So I've got those 4 highlighted. The first name, the last name, the hours, and the rate, and I click OK.
Well, how'd you highlight them?
What's that?
Well, how'd you highlight them?
Control click.
That'll work.
Control click or drag shift all the way to the right.
Thanks.
Maybe.
So notice we've now got 4 of these. Getters followed by setters. Now, I'm just telling you this. Sometimes when people do this, look on the screen if you would, they like all their getters together and all their setters together. So they don't do getter and setter. They do getter and they highlight those 4, then they do setter and they highlight those 4. I could care less. But again, I would strongly encourage you be consistent in the way you do it. All right, you'll see it done both ways. It really and truly, in the end, it doesn't matter. Now, let's just look at, we'll just grab this one here for now and look at these 2. When you've got a getter, you're passing nothing in because you're getting information. But you must have a return type. So the return type cannot be void. Does that make sense? That's truly what's making it a getter. You're getting something. On the other hand, with a setter, the return type is void because you're setting something. You're setting the value of a class variable, but you are passing in a parameter. Does that make sense? And you'll notice that's the way it's set up for all of these. All right? Now, that's, again, all fine and dandy, and we've actually got quite a bit of this done already. However, we still have the same problem we had before. What if we pass in nothing? Or what if we pass in something that's out of range? All right, remember this here? Let's see. See this that we did before? See this one? I'm going to copy that for the first name. Then I'm going to go down to my, sorry. I'm going to go down to my set first name, and I'm going to paste that in. I'm going to replace what's in there with that. Now, it's got FN. Why does it have FN? Because it gave it the same name here, right? So I can come in and either change this to FN Or I can make that first name. Either one of those will work. So now I've got that handled. And there's going to be something else that you're going to see in just a second. So I'm going to copy this line. Why? Because my set last name is the same thing, isn't it? Except I want to come in here and change first to last. And that'll be LNU. Now, think about something. Look on the screen. Just whatever you're doing, just stop for a second, please. Okay? Would you agree now that this, right here, that, is the same as what we put up here, wherever it was, for this? Isn't this the same thing? Well, there is something that you have in the IT world that's called dry. Do not repeat yourself. So I'm going to grab these 4 lines. Oops, not like that, I'm not. In fact, I'll just do the 2 right now because those are the ones I've done. All right, and I'm going to replace those with, now I can call set first name, and I can pass it in the actual first name. All right, and I think we called it FN in there. No, it is the first name. In fact, do we pass anything in there? Where am I? It's got to be whatever we called it up here, FN. So it would be FN. And we can call set last name, and we can pass it in LN. Question to you is, does that make sense? All right. So now I'm going to pull this one out, this dot hours, and I'm going to go down to my set hours. And again, I can either change this right here to H, or I can change these two to hours. It doesn't matter which way I do it. It's doing the same thing. Finally, I'm going to do my one for rate. So now I can comment this out and call set hours, and I can pass in H. And in just a second, I'll be able to call set rate and pass in R. Right now, it might give me an error. Oh, I guess I do have it in there. All right, but I'm going to copy this line right here. Now, believe it or not, what I've just shown you is kind of the hallmark of what you have to understand in order to be able to understand a language like Java. All right? And that is, I just gave you 3 ways of doing the same thing. All right? And you could actually make a case for many of them as far as which one is the best or which one is the worst. All right, I'm not even going to do that right now. I'm just telling you, you could do that. All right, so now we've got first name, we've got last name, we've got hours, and we've got rate. So what's missing? Well, you already know what's missing, and that's gross pay, right? All right, and this is going to be similar to what we did in the last one. I could copy it, but I'm not going to. All right, so I'm going to come down here, and under my set rate, I'm going to do another public double, and I'm going to call it get gross pay. All right? And I don't have to pass anything in. All right? But, again, if, now, what did we do before? I'm asking you this question. True or false? Didn't we do this? If hours less than max, less than or equal to max non-OT. Isn't that exactly what we did before? And we could do that check now, but that's not the way you do it. what you are always concerned with in an object-oriented programming language like Java is you want to do what's called maintain state. What that means is you want to make sure every variable has its most up-to-date value. And guess what? You already know how to do that. Don't we have something that's called get hours? So that'll always grab the latest and greatest value of whatever hours is. All right? So again, if that's the case, you already know that. We looked at it before, and we said no overtime. All right? Oops, I goofed up. So if that's the case, we want to say gross equals, now we can do this two ways. We could say hours times rate, and that'll be fine. Or we could technically come in here if we want to do, and we could say get hours times get rate. That's probably the best way of doing it. All right? But hopefully what you're seeing now is that we are going in here and we are writing routines and we are using things like getters and setters. Okay? So if we get down to the else here, and I'll just put in here worked overtime because they did. All right, very similar, again, the kind of stuff we did before, except it's gross equals get rate times max, that's a routine, times max non-OT. Look on the screen. Does everybody understand what this is? That's your straight time. You work more than 40 hours, so that's your 40 hours you're getting at your regular pay. That's what that is. All right? And then we want to add to that I don't believe I've got any errors in there. Is it possible? If it's me, so of course it's possible. All right. And since this was a double, we want to return the gross when we're done. Now, if that confuses you, again, I'll put that out there on the system for you. All right? But it has to somehow start to resonate inside of you what's going on in there. Because we're going to be doing quite a bit of this kind of stuff throughout the semester. All right? Literally, there's only one more routine, and it's not long, that we have to write. But guess what? We're not going to write it. We're going to let the system write it for us. All right? So, let's see. It looks like I'm missing a curly there. There. All right. What we want is we want to be able to print out everything we have. Does that make sense to you? We want to be able to print out the first name, the last name, the hours worked, the hourly rate, and the gross. We want to print out all 5 of those things. All right? Well, the way that we can do that is we can have the system generate it for us. And it's the same name as one we used in C#, and that is toString. So if you look up on the screen here, I'm down at the bottom of the program. I'm going to right mouse click and I'm going to choose generate again. And now I'm going to go down and I'm going to find toString, which is 2 under the getter and setter. And it says, what do you want? Guess what? We want the whole shooting match right there. So, okay. Now, we can change this any way we want to change it. Okay? If you don't like the way that looks, you can go in and you can add, you can go in and you can add \T's or \N's, etc. But I'm just going to use what they gave me. All right? Does that make sense to everybody? All right? So we've now got a program, but what we don't have is something that's using the program. Does that make sense? In other words, we're never instantiating or we're never creating any payroll 05 objects. All right? That's what we're going to do in just a second. And you'll also notice if you look up on the screen here, notice that word? I didn't put that in. This says that we're overriding the default toString method. And you might say, well, yeah, why are you doing that? Because if you don't, we're printing out the contents of an object. What happens is, rather than printing out the contents of the object, it prints us the address in memory where the object lives. So you're going to get some god-awful number that's filled with numbers and letters, which isn't going to be what you want. So this should say like first name Jeff, last name Scott, hours, etc. Now, I mean, look at this. I'm just gonna play with it a little bit. You don't have to do this. All right? And so we've got that. Now, I got a question for you. Do I need that? Wouldn't that be better? I think so. So just because they gave you something for free doesn't mean it's exactly what you want to use. So I'm going to use here get last name. Okay. And you know what? At the end of each one of these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, well, I'll just leave it the way it is. I'll see what it looks like when I get done. All right. Then I've got hours. Okay, I guess that'll work. But I want to add my pattern. That's why we added that pattern to begin with. So that's pattern2.format. And I don't want to format hours. I want to format get hours. All right. Same kind of thing for rate, except with rate, it's going to be pattern1 dot, and it's going to be get rate. Oh, I'm sorry, format get rate. All right. And another paren, I think. And then finally, for gross, all right. Again, I'm just lining these things up for my own edification. You don't have to do that. And this is get gross pay. Okay. Now, I don't know why, but they put it in like this with payroll 05 and a curly brace. If you don't like the way that looks, you change the way it looks. All right, this is already going to look quite a bit different than the way it looked out of the box, so to speak. All right, so once you've got that, do a file, save all. We're not going to run it. It would not work right now. Why wouldn't it work?
No main.
No main. So we're going to write main. Now, what I'm about to show you is kind of historically what people do, but you don't have to do it this way. All right? So what we're going to do is, so we've got, right here if you look, we've got payroll01.java, payroll02.java, payroll03.java, payroll04.java, and we just did payroll05.java. Okay? So as you probably guessed, we're going to come up to source. We're going to right mouse click. We're going to do a new Java class, but it's a little different. We're going to write payroll, even though we have it already, payroll 05, but then we're going to put on the end of that driver. Because that's what main truly is supposed to be in a program. That's one thing I tried to impress upon you in the other classes. And I've oftentimes kind of made the analogy of main to like a supervisor that's really good at delegating the right jobs to the right people. Well, that's kind of what we're doing here. All right, so I've got payroll 05 driver, no spaces. All right, here it is, and this is very short. Now, I'm not going to put in a ton of stuff in here, so I would want to make checks for everything. Does that make sense to everybody? I'd want to check that first name, I'd want to check it if it was blank, I'd want to check blank, last name it was blank, etc. All right? But I'm just going to do a little bit. So, now I put in my PS VM, because we do want a main in here. This is our driver. All right, so payroll. Oops. Payroll 05. Give it a name. Hey, I'm not that way. I'll call it Jeff. And I'm going to say equal new payroll 5. And I'm not going to give it any parameters. So if I run that stuff off, it should say FNU, LNU, 0, 0, 0. Does that make sense to everybody? Now what's nice, look on the screen if you would. I'm going to type in my SOUT again. And what do I want to print out? Just Jeff. That's going to call the toString method. That's why we wrote a toString method. All right? So, that's fine. Let's do one more. So, payroll 05. Let's do Gabriel. If you don't want to do it, whatever you want. Equals new payroll 05. But this will be the full Arg constructor. So we will pass into here Gabriel, breeding, and we'll see if the overtime works. So we'll do 50 and 50, something like that. Now I don't need that anymore, so let me get rid of that. And I put in single quotes stupidly and not double quotes, and that's why I got the error there. All right. Then we're going to do a system.out.println of Gabriel. All right. We're almost done, except for one thing. I want to fill the Jeff stuff up. Does that make sense? So I'm going to call Jeff dot set first name, and we'll set it to Jeff. Oops, try that again. Jeff dot set last name, set that to Scott. Jeff dot set hours, I don't know, 35, doesn't matter. And Jeff dot set rate, we'll say $100 an hour. Finally, let's see. Well, let's print out and see what it says. So we'll do the same one we did up here. All right. So this is testing our no Arg constructor. This is testing our full Arg constructor. Does that make sense to everybody? And we'll probably be done in around 15 minutes. All right. I'm going to, in just a minute, now they're having a problem with a printer in that room. And this damn system won't let me connect to that printer, and it won't let me connect to that printer. So what I'm going to give you for an assignment, I'm going to email it to you in just a moment. But I want to go over it first. All right? So let me save this. Did it save all? All right? And I'm going to go in. Make sure when you run this, you got to run the driver. You can't run the other one because, as Mr. Wharton said, there's no main. So, cancel. So I'm going to do a run, and it's payroll 5 driver I want to run. So notice, first name, FNU, last name, LNU, hours 0, rate 0, gross 0. That looks like it worked. Gabriel, 50, gross 2750. If there was no overtime, it would have been 2,500. So he got 10 hours worth of overtime. I think the calculation's correct. All right? And then we went in and we did the changes to me. So now it's got Jeff for the first name, Scott for the last name, 35. It doesn't like my rate in here. So something's hosed there. Did I not call the right thing? Which, hey, with me, anything's possible, right? Set rate. Oh, 100. Remember, that's out of range. 99.99. So we actually made another check, and it worked. So let's put in here 50. All right, I'll change that. In fact, I think we used 50 before. So I'll put $77 an hour. All right, so let me run it again. And there it is. It appears as though everything is working. All right? Now, you've seen this program written basically in a totally non-object oriented way. Would you agree with that? That's what we did basically the first 4 times. We refined it, etc. And now we wrote it, and we wrote it as a true Java program. What I'm going to ask that you do, and I'm going to give you, you have the rest of the period today, but you get some time tomorrow to work on it too, is to work on this. You may have done this before, I don't know, in a different class, but not in this language, of course. And this is what I'm going to send you. Write a program that calculates and displays a person's body mass index, or BMI. BMI is going to determine whether you're underweight, optimal weight, overweight, or obese for your height. So in other words, if your height was 3 feet and you weighed 500 pounds, you'd have a very high BMI. I have a very high BMI. All right? Weight is to be inputted in pounds. Height is to be inputted in inches. All right? And you're to have constants. Min height is 12, max height is 96, so a foot and 8 feet. Min weight is 1, max weight is 777. All right? And then, after you put those in, if the BMI that you calculate is less than 18.5, their status is underweight. If it's between 18.5 but less than 25, they're optimal weight. If it's between 25 but less than 30, you're overweight. And if it's 30 or above, you're obese. I said use constants. You should be able to figure out how to use constants for that. All right? And in addition, as it says, make sure that there's a valid numeric height. Now notice in here, look on the screen, because I'll give you this. I have to be able to print this out, but you'll have a hard copy of it anyway. But notice, under the numeric, there's a hyperlink on both these. It's the hyperlink to the same thing. Check if a string is numeric in Java. How did I find that out? It was really hard. I went in and I Googled, find a numeric string, or is numeric in Java. All right? So using plain Java, I did it like this. I think I copied the one that they had. I think it was this one. All right? But there's different ways that it can be done. All right? I'd like you to try to write this not the way we just did it, but the other way. You understand what I'm saying? I don't want you to worry about constructors, setters, and getters. I want you to write this the way we wrote the original payroll ones. All right? And I'll give you part of the class period tomorrow to work on that. Then we will rewrite it like with the way we just did it. Does all that make sense? All right? And I'm going to make it worth 25 points. All right? And then we're going to do a similar type of thing for Friday. All right? Now, we are going to go back in, not today, not tomorrow, but probably on Monday, and we're going to write one more iteration of this payroll program. And to try to be fair, if I can get it to the printer by then, I'm going to try to give everybody a hard copy. All right? Because I want to introduce interfaces, I want to introduce try-catch, etc. You won't have to type it in. But I will spend some time going over it, all right? And I'll want you to understand it. Now, Mr. Smith wrote the test for the regular Java test. And it's going to be very, very, very much similar, not to what we just did, but the earlier stuff. You won't have to really worry about using setters and getters, etc. You won't have to worry about that stuff at all. I don't think there's any of that on the first test. I'll go back and check, and I'll let you know before you take the test. All right? So you want to make sure that the height is valid, that the weight is valid. Let the user run the program multiple times. Keep track of your total. So make accumulators for total overweights, total underweights, total optimal weights, total obeses. And then at the very end, print that out. Again, very similar to the way we did it with the total payroll at the end of our program. Does that make sense to everybody? So I'm going to send this to you right now. All right, and I'd like you don't have to work on it right now. You can if you want to. All right, I'm going to let you go at 3:45. All right, this has just been a long first day. All right, maybe not for you guys, but I got here at 5:30, and it's been a long first day. All right.